Have you ever met someone so two faced it disgusts you? Or have you ever even realized you yourself may have acted in a two faced way? Now, the idea that I'm going into today is the idea of the inner self versus the surface level self. When trying to find my way in, let's just say, interacting with the people around me, I kind of found that there's a lot of people that are very two faced and only act a certain way in front of people, but don't actually feel that way, kind of thing. So, my interpretation of this idea is that you separate the mind into two main parts: the surface level version of yourself that everyone gets to see, and the inner self, which is a side of you that maybe only a handful of people that you know will ever see. Now, the main questions I kind of confronted myself with were, is this way of thinking another way of just saying two faced? And I don't think so, because yes, you could view it as the surface level version of yourself is just a face, and then the inner version of yourself is just a face. And yes, I guess if you wanted to, you could see it that way, but I see it more of a way of your true self is something that you only share to some people, and whether you may not be showing your true feelings to your with your surface level self all the time, you don't necessarily need to show your true self all the time, if that makes any sense. And the other thing I thought of was, is this something that's easily controllable when it comes to interacting with others? And for me, it's something that's more of an extra filter in my head, where it's like I am like, just when you put a filter on for talking to higher ups or someone that is um higher ranked in either your company you work in, or the the social standing, that sort of thing. Like, you tend to talk in a certain way, or to your parents, you know what I mean? You're not going to talk the same way you talk to your friends, to your parents, unless you do. To each their own, of course, but generally speaking, it is going to be different. And for me, I kind of thought, I take this concept as a way of looking, just putting an extra filter, being like, do I really need to tell this person everything about what happened to me the other night? Or can I just talk random shit with them, that because I'm just working with them at the moment? You know what I mean? Now, to help you get a better understanding, I'll share a personal experience of mine, then I'll go into more of a generalized standpoint. But when it comes to my experience with this idea, of course, like many others, it's hard to avoid at least a couple of people that can be deemed as two faced or act quite fake in front of most people. In my experience, I've met many people that only act a certain way in front of others, but when it comes to their close friends, they let a lot more slip, and then a lot more of their true emotions are shown because of them being in more of a comfortable environment that they found themselves in. That being said, I think the idea of being, instead of people leaning towards the more two-faced route of interacting with others and just kind of putting on this face, and it's a completely different version of yourself, it has nothing to do with how you actually feel. I think instead of that, I think if someone truly wants to be happy and true to themselves, I think instead they should act, or at least in my opinion, they should act in more of a way as their surface level self, and which is still a part of you. It's not like, I like to think of it as a Venn diagram where you have your inner self, you have a circle that's your inner self, and you have a circle that's your surface level self, and they are connected. There are two circles that connect to each other. There is that little spot in the middle, but they are still separate things, even though they're connected to the that middle part, which is you. Contrary to this, most people can't always have their surface selves up all the times. You would have to be able to get out your true and raw emotions at least occasionally, and have those not do that in front of those who aren't you're not really afraid of judging you. Like, bringing out your true self and that inner self in front of your closer friends or family that aren't really going to judge you for just like telling them how you feel at that given moment. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be able to let that out, because a lot of people will bottle that up, especially a lot of men, or the men culture. It's like the whole thing is to bottle up your emotions, and then eventually it'll explode, and that's it just always does. So instead of that, you should just be constantly being more eloquent with your feelings towards the people that you trust, so then you can keep yourself mentally sane, I guess, for the most part. And I think the concept of having a surface level version of yourself and a more inner version of yourself allows not only for the regulation of information, like I said before, and kind of having that filter, but also so you don't accidentally say too much to someone about something too personal to you. You could have accidentally this can help protect. This is something that can protect you from too much judgment from those that really don't understand where you're coming from. And that's why you need to keep your true, or I think it's better to keep your true inner feelings to your close friends and the family that understands you. Because from my experience, if you let in info from others that don't really know what you're talking about and know where you're come from, you're bound to come to a misunderstanding because you say something and they have previous experience and they don't really understand where you're coming from because they don't know you that much. And I think it's better to wait till you get to know that person better and actually have them understand. That's why it's better to, for most people, have that surface level version or surface version of yourself so that they don't necessarily need to know your innermost thoughts on the world and how you're in it, that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like they just need to know like what basically what you tell them kind of thing. Like they just need to know they don't need to know everything about how you feel, if that makes any sense. But I think the usability of this concept, obviously, like most things I say, I think it's of course purely my opinion, and I don't expect anybody to actually take any of this into consideration. If you do, absolutely wonderful. But at the same time, it's just me ranting. But I think, of course, anyone could find this useful, but I would say primarily to those who tend to overshare. And when someone disagrees with you because they don't understand your thoughts behind thinking a certain way, you could potentially lose the chance of forming a great relationship with someone just because you didn't really understand them with a certain concept. And this could literally be anything from a hobby to politics to a job to literally anything. You just don't come to that understanding, and that's that person's first impression of you. Obviously, first impressions mean pretty much everything this day and age. Obviously, you can get behind them, but for the most part, like you could be missing out on either a great experience with a friend or a great connection with someone in the future, that sort of thing. And obviously, I think miscommunication is one of the biggest problems with the human race in general, to be honest. And there's no real way to fix it. So, like, as people, we have to find other ways around it. For example, like I've said, separating the things you say into those that need to hear the surface level self and those who truly understand you and can help when you're sharing more of your true and personal feelings with the much less judgmental side of that because it's people you trust. And now the main things I would take away from kind of what I'm saying, if any of this makes any sense to you, but it's not everyone needs to understand you completely. There's going to be people that just don't get what you're talking about, or they are just have such a different environment and such a different take on things that there's no way that they're going to understand you. And even if I've struggled with this a lot in the past where I just want people to completely understand where I'm coming from, but at the end of the day that only really matters it that I'm only doing that for personal gratification of just like I want them to understand me. Realistically speaking, I don't necessarily need them to understand me. I just need them to understand the situation and how to deal with it rather than explaining entirely why we need to get to this solution every time. It's better sometimes with those surface level people and when you're showing more of your surface level self to just be like this was the problem and this is the solution kind of thing because it just creates a lot less friction with people understanding because people may be able to get to the same solution but the way they get there is different and then there's no use in creating conflict in the way you're getting somewhere if you're not since you're both agreeing on the same thing, if that makes any sense. And the other thing is, not everyone wants to completely understand you, and you kind of just have to be okay with that. Like some people aren't just gonna give it; they're just not gonna give a shit if they completely understand you. Like I said, they're gonna want to just know. okay, this is the problem, this is how I messed up, or this is how we messed up, and this is how we're gonna solve it, kind of thing. Like not every some people like me like to hyperanalyze pretty much everything, no matter the context, which in a lot of situations, socially and interacting with others, becomes quite the cause for friction. And you kind of just have to learn to be okay with not people not completely understanding where you're coming from on the surface level. That's where I think it's good to have that inner version of yourself that you can explain. And when you have time and are talking to people that you really want them to understand you because you have such a connection with them, and more times than not, though, since you've been interacting with that person and you know them so well, they're going to be much more willing to understand you and want to know the process of how you're getting from the problem to the solution, not just the problem and the solution. The whole process it gets there, if that makes any sense. Now, with that said, I would like to thank you again for listening to me rant for this long. If you did enjoy this, try watching some of my other videos, and I will hope to see you next time. Now, in this ridiculously huge world, are you being true to your inner self? Or are you too focused on the surface level version of you that you forgot any other version of yourself even existed?